We were here last week. George read the reading for us from Exodus about Moses and the burning bush. And God instructed Moses to lead the Israelites from being bound to being free. And after Moses did that, he returned to the same mountaintop, to the same place of higher consciousness. And he heard the voice of God again. And that's where God gave him the 10 commandments to share with us. And those are the commandments that we heard this morning in Paul's letter to the Romans. Now, when I think about commands, I think about a voice. So sometimes I think about a master with his dog, and how a dog follows the master's commands, the master's voice. And really, the purpose of the spiritual life is exactly what happened with Moses. It's for us to move from a place where we're being bound to a place where we are free. And when we do that, we're becoming more and more attuned to the voice, the command of God. And that's why it's so important for us, and it's why I talk about almost every Sunday about getting still so that you can listen to that voice and become attuned to it, rather than being attuned to all the other voices of the world and the voices that are in our heads. Now, the 10 Commandments, I don't know about you, but I find them pretty easy to live by. I really don't struggle with them, and I don't mean to come across that I'm on some high moral grounds here. But I don't wake up in the morning and go, gee, I really feel like stealing something today. Or I'd really love to find another God to worship today. And I certainly don't struggle with honoring my mother and father or the Sabbath. And I don't ever really seriously think about killing somebody. And I have to say, never in my life have I ever coveted my neighbor's wife. Now, those commandments are commandments from the Old Testament. Jesus came to give us new commandments from the New Testament. And now this is where I have to honestly say, these are the commandments that I do struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Those new commandments of Jesus. Jesus said, love your enemies. Bless those that curse you. Do good to those who hate you. Pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. Wow. I really have trouble doing that. I don't know if you're in the same boat as I am. But that, to me, those commandments there are hard. It is hard for me to bless somebody who curses me. And that's what I want to talk about today, because Jesus gives us here this new commandment of loving one another. And in fact, he says it's the two greatest commandments, he said, is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. It is very difficult for us to love those who think differently from us, who behave differently than we do, who look differently from us, who are of a different political affiliation than we are. It's hard. And that's what this exhibit at the SCA, Touching Strangers, is all about. It's taking people who on the surface are different in their looks and beliefs and bringing them together in their oneness. To me, that's what the lectionary readings for this morning are all about. Now, we know in our own little communities here of Saugatuck and Douglas that there is often an us versus them mentality. And we see that. Just open up the local paper every week, and you'll see some issue where somebody is not getting along with somebody else. because they think differently or have a different idea, or they want to do things one way and they want to do things another way. And it's hard to bring those people together to resolve those issues, even in our small little community. I have always found it interesting that Christian churches have to advertise that all are welcome. I was driving on the M89 towards Fenville, and the Methodist church there has a sign out front, all are welcome. And then there's a Christian Reformed church in Saugatuck. It's on Blue Star and Allegan, and if you look at their sign, it says, all are welcome. And even we at Douglas UCC say, everyone welcome, no exceptions. Jesus' commandment, if Jesus is the person on whom Christianity is based, why would we have to say all are welcome? Because Jesus welcomed everybody. So you would just think having a cross would be a sign that all are welcome. But of course we know we need to say that, because so many of us came from Christian churches where we were not welcome. And it's sad that we have to say that. But the point is that we still live at a time where there are churches in the name of the Christ which are not welcoming to everybody. Oh, they may say that they are, but how would it be one of those churches if a transgender person came to worship, or a gay couple came to worship holding hands? The welcome is often guised in what we hear Richard Rohr say in the words of integration this morning, which is, well, I've been commanded by Jesus to love you, so of course you're welcome because I love you. However, that one aspect of you, probably not God's best plan. That is not the love that Jesus is talking about when he says to love one another. It's not, I love you, but. It's, I love you. That's what Jesus is talking about here. Now, many of you know that I wrote a book which is called Gay is a Gift. And in that book, I talk about how I am so grateful that I have the experience of being the other, because it helps me to understand and be compassionate for all different types of people. My being gay is innate to who I am. So when someone says to me, Sal, as a Christian, I am commanded to love you. However, there's that one aspect of you that I just can't accept. But when I hear that, I say, then you don't love me in the way Jesus commanded us to love one another. Now, I do not want us at Douglas UCC to talk as if we're on some moral high ground, because we're not. We say that all are welcome, no exceptions, and that's true. And as we look around the room, we see straight people and gay people and lesbian and transgender. We see people who are low-wage workers and people who are multimillionaires. And we all gather together, and it's wonderful. But most of us are like-minded. Most of us have very similar views on social issues and on political issues. Are we really accepting those who think differently than we do? Or are we still viewing them as the other? Now, I'm going to give you an example from my own life, my own struggle. When I hear a Christian pastor get on the pulpit and persecute gay people, I have a very difficult time loving that person. I have a very difficult time seeing the light of the Christ in that person. However, if I call myself a Christian, I am commanded to love that person unconditionally. And this is where the struggle is with this new commandment Jesus gave us. It's not the old commandments about stealing and honoring your mother and father. This one is the greatest. Love one another as I have loved you. Now, in the gospel today, Jesus talks about that if you have issues with one another, like me with maybe that conservative Christian pastor, he says to go to each other alone, the two of you, and see if you can resolve this. And he says where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there with them. And how beautiful that would be if I could invite that conservative pastor to my home to get to meet me and talk to me and see what I'm all about. And do it in the name of Jesus, who is in the room with us together. I think what we would discover is that we're more alike on things than we are unalike. Boundaries, Jesus talks in the gospel today about binding and loosing. Boundaries are not real. They're made up. Think about state lines. Somebody decided this shape is New York, and this right here is New Jersey. And on this side we have these laws, and on this side we have these laws. Same thing with boundaries of countries. Somebody decided this is where this country ends and this one begins. So on this side we have this culture, and this language, and these beliefs, and on this side it's something totally different. But they're not real. Somebody made those. We do that as well. We create boundaries between one another. And Jesus came to say, I came to dissolve the boundaries. Think about it. Jesus went out of his way to purposely hang out with the so-called sinners of his day. He made it a point to be seen with them in front of the so-called holy people. To say, I love these people unconditionally. I'm not judging them. He dissolved the boundaries, but we still have boundaries, whether we think about it or not, and many of us are comfortable with that. And oftentimes we ask people questions. Where do you live? So if someone says, I live on the lake shore, or they say, I live in a trailer park, we have a different understanding maybe of who they are. Or I went to an Ivy League school, or I went to a community college. A friend of mine said when she moved to Holland a few years ago, everywhere she went, people would say, what church do you belong to? Because that is a boundary. It puts you in there. And so for me, someone would say, well, you're gay, you're in this boundary. And that's why Richard Rohr says in his words this morning, we keep each other bound when we do that. When we put them in a category and we see them as separate or the other. Jesus came to say, let's dissolve the boundaries. We're all one. And the command that I give you is to love one another. Many of you are familiar with the words from 13 Corinthians. They're words about love that are read at pretty much every single wedding. But the words are, love is patient, love is kind, love is humble, does not put on airs, love is never rude, not prone to anger, does not seek itself. That's what love is. It's not this frilly romantic love that we see in movies. Jesus is saying, if you really love the way I'm commanding you to love, you love unconditionally. That means you don't put any conditions on it. You don't put any boundaries around it. I love you just the way you are.